Like it or not, mobile gaming is a huge market that only continues to grow. With the advent of newer, faster and better technology such as Apple's iPhone 15 Pro, we've reached a point where modern console game quality is possible on mobile devices. Today we're looking at Warframe on iOS, a game that's already been ported to seemingly every platform under the sun. Canadian developer Digital Extremes has a long and strong history in pioneering game engine technology. The company collaborated with Epic on creating the original Unreal game exclusively for PC, the proverbial gaming David that went up against the Goliath that was Quake in the late 90s, early 2000s. Digital Extremes has kept with its own in-house Evolution engine over the years, shipping Dark Sector and The Darkness 2 during the PS3 Xbox 360 generation before moving on to Warframe itself. Coming from a fast-paced, high-performance pedigree means that speed and precision is vital, even if you're playing on a mobile with touchscreen controls. Upon a fast load, you have a full PC-like suite of graphical options on the phone itself, aside from resolution. It launched without a frame rate option also. However, following a recent patch, it now has one, which I originally noted as required. Prior to this, the game was capped at 30 FPS across all iOS devices, which was an issue I had, but now though you can choose 30, 40, 50 and 60 FPS outputs, which greatly increases the fluidity and input latency. In regard to base settings, we're capped at an approximate maximum of 1440 by 810 with HDR on by default. Note, due to the aspect ratio, it has black borders on the top and bottom via the TV output here, but it fits the full screen of the phone itself. It also offers a dynamic or user-defined scaling down from that, and you can scale GPU-accelerated particles, sun and local shadows, depth of field, motion blur, chromatic aberration and film grain. Screen space ambient occlusion is disabled, but it's still visible in the menu. Using the Steam Deck and Switch versions, we can see that this is largely a tweaked version of the same menu via a local INI most likely. Beyond this, you can fine-tune network control, brightness and UI to your heart's content. One change here is the iOS version limits more options, such as the use of FSR 2.2 that the Steam Deck can use, instead relying on the engine's own internal scaling solution via a fixed resolution percentage scale or a dynamic one via the auto option. Now this is the single biggest impact to image quality on the phone version compared to the Steam Deck, as it has no temporal element and it looks closer to plain FXAA, leaving a pixelated and unstable image in many of the game's high contrast areas, something it shares with the Switch version also, although that has lower effects, no depth of field and is capped at 30 FPS. Starting with performance, the Steam Deck had the upper hand over the iOS version prior to that 60 FPS patch landing, adding the option to the 15 Pro. Even the iPad Pro M2 powered version, which runs at an approximate 1080p output, was capped at 30 FPS. Pre-update, the iPhone 15 Pro set to medium with dynamic rate scaling, DRS enabled and depth of field disabled, we were able to maintain a decent 30 FPS rate in action. But our old nemesis returns, uneven frame delivery cadence. Looking at the frame time graph here, the frame rate shows a pretty stable 30 FPS, but the frame times skip between 16, 33 and 50 milliseconds, which can make the game feel like it is dropping frames. In actuality, the issue is that each frame is coming at you with a random rate of delivery, which in many cases can feel worse than simply dropping frames, which it can also do, with a few 66 millisecond spikes often followed by a short sequence of 16 millisecond ones. Again, highlighting that buffered frame issues is the biggest cause of problems here. Now most of these look to be GPU and or memory related, as we often see stutters when entering new areas or fast running through the level, which requires the game to stream in new data. Even the 60 FPS mode still has long pauses at times due to the streaming of data, and here an approximate low of 800 by 450 was noted.
The 60 FPS mode achieves a smoother level of gameplay and it benefits from the higher target. We are often in the middle ground of 40 to 50, but because it spends its majority hitting that 16 millisecond frame time, it is a net win. The constant frame pacing issues at 30 are now far less of an issue, and even the iPad Pro with its higher memory bandwidth struggled in the same sections, showing more work to maximize the engine to Apple's API is required, I feel. Contention can cause issues such as when playing back a video or audio file in-game. Dense sections of post-effects bloom or GPU particles can also cause more stutter, and performance is not affected when playing online with others, and the game seamlessly blends across the single-player and co-op gameplay. It supports cross-play with PC and console in addition to other iOS players, so you can very easily find people to play with. The speed of loading is very good, and I found the seamless and fast loads into the game and new missions as smooth as any other version across all formats. Switch can run a decent level of 30 FPS, but it has lower effects overall. The Steam Deck can run at 60 FPS, but it also shows how demanding the game can be. At a native 720p at medium settings, we can still dip below 60 even in the real-time cinematics, but if you bump settings up to the maximum at that same 720p native output, we see results of 30 FPS and lower. The options menu allows us to tweak settings to a medium preset using FSR2's output at 1280 by 720p image from a dynamically scaling resolution below that. We are fully GPU and or memory bound here. This shows why older iOS devices required a 30 FPS cap, but the iPhone 15's GPU is more powerful than the Steam Deck, but memory bandwidth is not, and thus both cannot lock to 60 FPS. Even if the medium settings between the two are not the same. In similar sections and similar resolutions, the Steam Deck is almost identical on performance, but just pips on image quality due to the higher visual effects and FSR2 DRS option. It is a good performing game on the iPhone 15 Pro, but it still has frame pacing issues and bigger streaming stutters often enough to fall below the Steam Deck version. From a quality perspective, Warframe is a good looker, but it's not the best demonstration of a high-end graphics. It has a gritty, dark art design and generally has an aesthetic and colour scheme all common with mid to late generation Xbox 360 games. Textures are a mixed affair with some decent details, but it relies on its post-processing to improve image quality and hide the lower polygon counts and material quality with a heavy depth of field and good per pixel motion blur. It doesn't really use PBR based materials, and this is one of the reasons why it can look dated in certain areas. Compared to the Switch, it offers less detail specifically in textures, with the install being only 14GB versus 16 of the Switch and over twice that on the Steam Deck, just shy of 40GB. As such, we see far lower MIP quality often, which is down to the wide iOS device approach. Level of detail is also slightly lower than Switch, but bokeh depth of field, bloom and crepuscular rays are present and are all missing from the Switch. Pitted against the Steam Deck, it is not the same level, with level of detail, filtering, textures, depth of field all being reduced over the Valve handheld. The iPhone version offers a very low bitmap quality, or they load in late, and textures rely on bilinear filtering the same as the Switch, and alongside the low anti-aliasing quality, it can leave a game that on the 6.2 inch screen looks very good, but blown up on a 4K large one falls below expectations. A big reason for this is the 15 Pro has 8GB of RAM compared to 16 of the deck, but the opposite is true in comparison to the Switch. Much of this though is likely not directly related to the hardware, but instead a result of the one-size-fits-all approach Digital Extremes have taken with this iOS version. The iPad Pro version highlights this with a cleaner, sharper image, but can suffer as much with low textures, with other games on the 15 Pro, such as Death Stranding, delivering far higher visual quality and assets. It's clear that the hardware is capable of more.
Taking this one with us.
What has he done to you? I can't lose another Tenno.
As a big cross-generational and cross-play game, Warframe has maintained a long life and large community of players. This iPhone and iPad version certainly provides all the fun and fluid combat of any platform, more so now it has a 60 FPS option. The loading and speed of games is very good, with a decent menu choice to tweak and improve performance or visuals. The main issues come down to the inconsistent performance, low image quality, and poor textures at times. Performance could still be better, and more improvements here and on texture streaming would go a long way to improving the main issues, as would an FSR2 integration to aid the performance and visual quality to closer align to the Steam Deck version. I think a bespoke A17 updated version would go a long way to bringing the iPhone 15 Pro closer to the Steam Deck version. However, as an example of how close mobile gaming is coming to console quality, Warframe makes a decent statement for its future, even if there's still plenty to improve on. And that's it for all things mobile, technology and game related. Remember, if you like what we do here on IGN Performance Reviews, then keep it IGN, and we'll catch you on the next one.
You must die!